Our resident election campaign advisor. He's back at the big table with me this evening. Julius, it's good to see you again. How many hours has it been, since we were last talking here? Yeah, very short night for us. Never mind who won which state. We've gone through that. Did we get any clarity on where this race is headed?
Right. I mean, you just set it up. Rubio had to win at least one state. He did. Ted Cruz had to win in the crucial state of Texas for him, his home state, and he did. And Trump had a good showing, but it wasn't a showing that Trump had hoped for. Again, it boils down to delegate math, and they're on the way to the convention in Cleveland, and I think they're now looking at raking up all those delegates in order to have a clear shot at the nomination.
And we have had one casualty.
Indeed.
Right?
Indeed, Carson is out. Ben Carson said he didn't have a political path forward. Interesting wording there. Yeah. But he's out. So the race starts to consolidate. At the end, it's going to be a question, how much can it consolidate? The next contest coming up, of course, on March 15th, where Ohio, Florida is voting. Yeah. That's going to be critical, and Rubio has to deliver. What
about the math with that? I mean, all eyes are on what's going to happen in 2 weeks. And I was reading that if you do the math, right, for the Republicans, the delegates that the winner would get in Florida and Ohio would actually be enough, right, to leave Donald Trump, right, in the dust.
And so right now you're looking at 1,237 votes to win the nomination. Trump right now is at 285. On that March 15th contest, it boils down to 367 delegates that are up for grabs. So the problem is, how are those delegates allocated? Yeah. And so if Cruz, if Rubio, if Trump stay in the race, they get split up. And so there's no clear path forward for any of them. It could lead to a contested convention in Cleveland.
Exactly. I mean, okay, so that's one thing. And let's take the other scenario, which we talked about last night, and that is Republicans abandoning their party and voting for Hillary Clinton. Now, something interesting is going on here. I want to take you back to the year 1988, when George Bush Sr. accepted the Republican nomination for president. And in his acceptance speech, I think we've got a graphic here we want to show you. Yeah, he went into the history books by saying, "I want a gentler, kinder America." That was 1988. That was a Republican. Now listen to what Hillary Clinton said last night after Super Tuesday.
Might be unusual, as I've said before, for a presidential candidate to say this, but I'm going to keep saying it. I believe what we need in America today is more love and kindness.
Now, isn't she speaking to the Republicans who may abandon their party with that language?
Well, I think she absolutely is, but I also think that she's driving that wedge into the Conservative Party, which is, let's be frank, at a full-out civil war right now. You have the establishment, and then you have the Trumpers out there. The party is split, and it's just guided by mistrust right now. So we heard Trump last night in his victory speech saying he's going to be a great unifier. I haven't seen that yet, and I'm looking at the general election. If Trump does become the nominee, how is he going to bring this party together? You need party unity in order to be able to compete against Democrats.
But, I mean, you know, for someone who studies elections, you have to admit, for Hillary Clinton to use that language, she knew as soon as she said that, people, I mean, on social media, everyone was comparing it to George Bush. She knew that using those words would immediately mean she was speaking to the Republicans. That's not an accident.
By no means. This was laid out. This was very strategic. And again, it sort of splits the establishment wing of the party. You know, remember, Trump, just before the caucuses, just before South Carolina, went after George W. Bush. Yeah. And so I think it splits the party right there where it hurts. Yeah. And she wants to alienate the establishment party, part of the party from Trump.
Let's talk about the whole Super Tuesday complex here in Europe. You know, even before people were waking up to discover that Trump had taken a big step forward in the presidential race, Trump had already used some verbal ammunition, calling the European Union, Sweden, and Germany a disaster.
Radical Islamic terrorism, big problem, not only for us. You take a look at Germany, you take a look at Sweden, you take a look at Brussels. You look at some of these places, it's like A disaster.
A disaster. There you go, Donald Trump making friends every time he opens his mouth, some people would say. Well, we've reported that Trump claims to be of German heritage. Now, his father's family apparently came from a village in southern Germany. So what do Germans think of a distant relative who could become the next U.S. president?
Peaceful and in recent years friendly once again could describe the mood between the U.S. Secretary of State and Germany's foreign minister and transatlantic relations overall. But now German policymakers feel this friendship is at risk. And all because of this man, Donald Trump. It's unlikely he'll ever be a close friend of Germany. To him, that crazy country that takes in refugees.
We're not letting the Syrians come into our country. We have no idea who they were. They could be ISIS. Look at what's happened with Germany. Look at what's happened to Sweden. Look at what's happened to Brussels. It's not going to happen to our country.
This shrill tone is worrying Germany's otherwise sedate foreign policymakers. Donald Trump as U.S. president is something that the German foreign minister didn't want to directly comment on in Washington. Instead, he had these words to say to a group of students. In Germany and in Europe, something is gaining momentum in our domestic politics. And to be honest, I'm also seeing it here in the United States during the primary campaigns. It's the politics of fear. It's dangerous for Europe and the U.S. It's bad for the world. And in the end, it will also be bad for our transatlantic relations. Leading Democrat candidate Hillary Clinton at least has the advantage of being predictable from the foreign minister's point of view. They've known each other since her days as Secretary of State. The German government views Clinton as a far better choice than Trump.
And, you know, Julius, the fact that we even had that story on the air tonight, I mean, it proves that the Trump possibility now is getting the attention of the entire world. I mean, how do you see that? And are we talking about, you know, we used to say that the U.S. was pivoting to Asia. A lot of columnists are saying there will be no pivot to Asia. There will be no repivot to Europe. There will be a pivot within if Trump is president. Do you see it that way?
Well, I think you can look at it from the geographical perspective and the geopolitical perspective. I'm looking at it from an election perspective, and Trump is not hunting for votes in Germany. He is looking at the conservative base, and anything he can do to divide people, anything he can do to mobilize and anger up his base, he's using it. And so if that means talking about Germany and our situation over here with the refugee crisis, he's happy to use that in order to drive a wedge, to create fear, and to mobilize his base.
Before we let you go, let's look at the next 2 weeks. How do you see things developing? I mean, you've been down this campaign road before with Barack Obama. What has to happen in the next 2 weeks, first of all, for the Republican Party not to implode and, you know, splinter off into pieces?
Right. I mean, you see the Democrats over there, Hillary and Bernie, there's been some heated language, but at the end of the day, they all know that they're coming together around their nominee come fall. This is going to be the most challenging aspect for the Republican Party. How do they not just completely fall apart in this civil war that they're engaged in? And I think that's what they have to address. Fundraising is, of course, going to be another big aspect, and building up the operation in order to be able to move forward and mobilize that base.
And you say a civil war in the Republican Party. You don't think that's exaggerated? I mean, you think it is a civil war right now in the party?
There is a great rift. There's the establishment. They want to have absolutely nothing to do with Trump. But they got to be careful. If they go too hard after Trump, I think that feeds right into his narrative, and Trump is going to feed off that.
Julius from Laar, as always, we appreciate you coming in, spending lots of hours with us. The insights are certainly appreciated. Thank you.